There we go. Welcome back, Bears fans. Been a couple of weeks since we've seen you. Everybody went on IR last week. Kieran kicked it off with the flu. Mike followed it up with COVID. And then I got a head cold just for good measure. So sorry we haven't seen you in a couple of weeks, but happy to be back. Wish it was under slightly better circumstances, but we'll talk about that today. Kieran, how you feeling?
Much better. Trust me. I know last week was the week to do a podcast, but trust me, for your own ears, you wouldn't have liked it. My voice, by the time it hit the day that our normal podcast would have been, that's when my voice completely went. Where it was described to me in work that I sounded like a frog. So I don't think it was I don't think it would have been a good one to do. But look, obviously circumstances last week would have been very, very positive and very, very good. But surprisingly, I'm not too negative this week anyway, so it's gonna be a good episode this week.
Well, I am glad to hear it. I'm glad to hear you. Luckily, you have a voice, but it's going around. My other podcast partner, Brett Coleman, he got it in Kansas City this weekend. So we didn't record bootleg today. For all you out there who are both Bear Era and bootleg listeners, little heads up, we're going to be a day late this week. Anyways, I have to ask Oscar Gonzalez a question before we get started. It says, got my bottle, EJ, and I think he has to be referring to the bootleg single barrel. And Oscar, is that true? Because I just heard from the distributor today that they didn't have the bottles yet. So I'm not exactly sure how that happened. If it did, it's Christmas magic, and that's amazing. I hope you really enjoy it. For all of those of you at home that don't follow bootleg, we did launch a single barrel of Woodinville whiskey this week, and they sold out in under 24 hours. So they should be showing up. And if Oscar's any indication, maybe soon, sooner than we thought, which is awesome because can't wait for people to try it. That's the next big wave. It was really cool to have them sell out, but it'll be even cooler to have people react to those. So anyways, we need to get into what the Bears are doing and what they did in Lambeau Field. Now, they did not win, and as the title of this live stream says, they stumbled in Lambeau Field, but there's both good things and bad things to talk about from that game, and we will give, I would say, both fair air in this live stream. And it was not all bad news. The good news, the too long didn't read version, is balance is back in this rivalry. This is a game once again, and it should be that way for some time with what Ben Johnson's building. Don't want to start with the end here. I'll start at the beginning, but Kieran, why don't you take first crack at your feelings about watching the first of the two Green Bay Chicago games, or in this case, Chicago Green Bay, because it was at Lambeau, and really sort of what you took out of most of that game, not everything, but start on one side of the ball and tell us what you thought of that effort.
Yeah, this week was a little bit different because I decided on like the Thursday, I think it was, that I was going to take like a hiatus from social media and just enjoy these games, because it's not very often that we get to talk about meaningful games in December as Bears fans. And normally you would think a Bears team that lost with the last play of the game, we would be coming on here being extremely negative, but I do think context is very, very important, because yes, while there was a mistake at the very end, it was essentially the same play that we saw them win against the Philadelphia Eagles, and those things happen. But I took way more out of that game than I thought I would, because I'll start off with the offense. The first half, it was not pretty, but they, I think, survived enough to stay in that game. And then in the second half, I've not seen an offense or a team do that to the Green Bay Packers defense, where it literally looked like every single time the Bears were going to get the ball, they were going to score. Like, if there was another, I don't know, 10 minutes left and the Bears, they threw that pick and they knew they were still going to get the ball a couple more times, you could probably guess about maybe 80% of the time they probably would have scored, because that's the way the game was going. Caleb was playing really good football. The running game was really starting to affect Green Bay to where they could not stop it. And I know everybody probably in talk radio and everything was probably talking about the Caleb Williams throw, but ultimately what won the game for the Packers was them stopping the Bears, so it got to fourth down, because the Bears are 1 yard away. And we always say it's those minimal things that can cost you a game, and that's what cost the Bears. But I don't think you should be disappointed, because what it showed me was this is an ascending team. But also, if we want to put a little bit of realism in there, and I know Ben Johnson this week has been talking about they need to at least win 2 more games to be a playoff team. Like, I want to see the Bears in the playoffs. I will say that Packers game should give you a little bit of pause of what this team can do in the playoffs. Because if you do not have a pass rush, you can't win these games. And that's really the difference. If the Bears had a pass rush against Green Bay, they would have found that game much easier than it needed to be. Because the defense, other than the pass rush, had to be perfect, and it wasn't. And they made just enough plays to keep them in the game, but not enough to win. And unfortunately, that's the way it is. And the Bears now, look, I'd say the positive part for me is it's very clear what the Bears have to do to be a playoff team with hopes of actually doing something in the playoffs. For me, this year is just, can you get a step ahead of where you're supposed to be and make the playoffs and get in the competition to get there? Because I think you do enough things that are good, but when you come up against a Seattle or you come up against an LA Rams, if you can't get after the quarterback, you're kind of playing with one arm tied behind your back. And that's how I felt in that game, where I think the Bears were good enough to win it, and they probably should have won that game in the end. Now, it probably would have been, you would have had to score on a 2-point conversion to win it, because it looked like the Packers could score every time they got the ball in the second half as well. But I give a lot of credit to the coaches, especially on the offensive side. It wasn't great at the start of the game. It wasn't great in that first half. But once the second half turned around, they made their adjustments. And honestly, the Bears offense was dominating the Packers defense in the second half. And that's really, really positive, because that Packers defense is legit. It's one of the best defenses you'll play in the National Football League. And the Bears offense, which is why you paid your head coach so much money, looked good when they really needed to. And they could have played for another 2 or 3 quarters and the Bears probably would have kept scoring. And it just so happens that they made a mistake, and it just happened at the wrong time. And it's unfortunate, but I think I come away from the game way more positive than I ever have been to a loss to Green Bay, because I think that game kind of showed the Bears are good. I think I said this to my family who I was texting at the time. I don't think the fan base for Green Bay or the fan base for Chicago can deny the opposition. The Green Bay Packers are a very good football team, but so are the Chicago Bears. And I know it sucks, and the feeling has been pretty bad this week for some Bears fans, but I think that's a pretty positive situation to be in, knowing that your team's good, at least. There's things that need to be fixed, but I think overall, I came away with the game pretty positive, thinking that I still feel confident moving forward that the Bears can get enough wins to get themselves into the dance.
Yeah. And again, the dance, I don't think is the thing. There's been so much talk, especially if you live in Chicago, about, hey, expectations have shifted, good enough isn't good enough anymore. And I kind of want to put the brakes on that because a lot of the speculation about this team from us and many, many others before the season was, hey, they just need to be better than fourth in the NFC North because they have been that for a while. And the other three teams in this division are really good. And that hasn't changed. And the fact that the Bears already have a winning record, if they don't go to the playoffs, or if they go to the playoffs and, like you said, they're one and done against a better team, that's okay. I'm not going to hold it against them, right? Windows are short in the NFL, but we said if Ben's offense comes through, Caleb shows progression, and this team is in it at the end, that's a winning season for the Bears. And all those things have occurred. I don't think you can argue with any one of those three. But now people are like, well, I want him to get into the playoffs. I want him to win the playoffs. Well, sure. But it was never going to be a one-year gig. And I would much rather see it be a steady and sustainable climb. And it has all the look in the world of being that right now. So it is a successful season. Anything we see from here on out is extra. And yes, maybe puts them a little bit ahead of schedule, which is not a bad thing. I'm not saying stop. I'm just saying don't say if they don't get there that that's the way it was always going to be, because it was not a sure thing before the season started. Like you, I came away from the game, even though it is a loss to Green Bay, which never feels very good, knowing that Green Bay knows that this is a game now. And that is a very different thing. Ben Johnson, you talked about it, second half adjustments, has been the best coach in the NFL after halftime. Like, that is objectively true in terms of the performance of the team before and after. There's no bigger difference. And Ben Johnson is leading the NFL after halftime. He is making very good adjustments. I know a lot of people sort of poo-poo halftime adjustments and say, oh, nothing really happens. Well, something's happening with the Bears because they play very much better in the second half after they get a look at the other team. And that is what's kept the Bears in all these games. It's what's won the Bears these games, especially late in the game, all the come from behind victories. So this program, this football team, when you look at the drive from the beginning of the fourth quarter, that was the one for me. Say 17-play drive. The Bears offensive line absolutely leaning on the Packers defense at will. 17 plays, 10 of them runs, ends in a touchdown, ties the game at 21. Basically anybody's ball game at that point, and says, like, you don't get to run it up on us. These aren't games that are going to be over midway through the third quarter as we've been used to, or sometimes even in the first half. This is not that team anymore. And to come down to a play that they didn't make, I will give Green Bay all the credit in the world. They played a very good game and did what they needed to do to win. But for this game to come down reasonably, not without some fluke of special teams or anything else, to just straight up offense on defense, both teams, to come down to, look, if Caleb catches DJ Moore open on that last play, he scores easily. And then it's a question of, hey, do you go for the 2-point conversion? The fact that this game came down to that, Green Bay knows. Like, they won't say it, but they know right now that the Bears are true competition and aren't going anywhere anytime soon. And to me, that makes this season successful. In terms of the Packers, look, they built their team to play a certain way, and it played exactly that way, and it needed to. The protection for Love is something that Green Bay has always had. They did. In total, the Packers only allowed 5 pressures in true pass sets. That's just over 1 per quarter. That is very good protection, and Love took advantage of it. He had a great day. Well over 200 yards, 3 touchdowns, 3 big time throws, average depth of target 12.8 yards. So he was chucking it down the field. NFL rating 120 reflected that he did indeed play a very good game. Christian Watson, like, there are very few players in the NFL that mean more to their team than Christian Watson does to his. We've seen the Packers without Christian Watson on offense. They are a very different animal. With him on the field, he is elite. He is a field stretcher. He is a big play guy. You could very easily argue, no Christian Watson, Packers aren't even close in this one. They definitely don't win it, but they're probably not even close. They probably get blown off the field. He had 4 targets, 4 catches, 2 TDs. Yards per route run, over 4.2. That is just Jackson Smith and Jigba territory. That is elite. That is better than any full season any wide receiver has ever had. Again, that's not his full season rank, but for this game, it was well over 4.2, which is stratospheric. Super, super good. Something else that matters about that: no contested catches and no missed tackles forced. These were schemed open run by catches, and he can pay those off. He is that kind of player. Super dangerous. I know the Bears are playing without all their chips on defense. I am well aware. You could also argue that a Bears team that is not absolutely riddled with injuries probably wins this game pretty easily as well, but they have been fighting from behind the eight ball on terms of defense all year long, and it showed up in this one. But the fact that the Packers had to have all their guns firing in order to win this one against a depleted Bears defense and then got leaned on by the offense. Micah was frustrated after the game. There's nobody more escapable in the NFL right now than Caleb. There's also nobody faster, which is kind of crazy. I want to talk about that. Caleb Williams is the fastest quarterback in the NFL. And for everybody that's going to hit the comments and say, no, that's not true. No, it's demonstrably true. He has 5 runs of over 20 miles an hour this season. Every other quarterback in the league, so all the ones you want to name, have 4 total combined. So Caleb 5, rest of the league 4. He is the fastest quarterback in the NFL. It doesn't seem like it, doesn't always look like it, but GPS data don't lie. He is super duper quick, and it makes a big difference. And Micah was like, man, I should have eaten that guy's lunch like 5 times. And he's not wrong. He should have. Against a lot of other quarterbacks, the Packers would have ended up with probably 3 more sacks. And that is an advantage. And the Bears played a very good football game, and there are no wins without winning in the NFL, but there are messages and warnings, and the Bears set both.
Yeah, and the interesting thing, and I was thinking about this, I think, on Monday. I went back to think of one of our live streams probably from about a month ago, where we spoke about which games we thought that the Bears could potentially win. And I think we both had the Bears losing to the Packers at Lambeau. But we mentioned this very scenario, that if you were in this position with Green Bay, look, I know people are disappointed, but at the end of the day, the Packers have 9 wins, the Bears have 9 wins. Yes, they have a tie, which is the reason that they're ahead in the NFC North right now. But the Packers have to travel to Denver to face a team that is very, very hot and playing very, very good football in the Denver Broncos. And the Bears get to stay at home and play against the Cleveland Browns, who have been such an up and down team. Like, it's probably good that they scored a bunch of points last week, because it probably means they'll score about 9 points this week, because that's the way that team has been. But just being able to stay at home, like, if it turns out to where the Bears can handle business against the Browns and the Denver Broncos look good against Green Bay, you could be coming back to Soldier Field in the exact same position you were in, heading to Lambeau Field. And that would be a good position to be in. But you mentioned it. The Packers have very good players, very good playmakers. Christian Watson, obviously Jaden Reed was back for that game as well. The running backs were healthy, which wasn't the case for a previous couple of weeks. They got a couple of guys back on defense as well. So the Packers, look, I know they're missing I know Tucker Kraft's been out and Devontae Wyatt was out, but other than that, like, everybody else was pretty much there. And you could see it, like, Christian Watson's always been that type of guy. If you can get him in space, he's lethal. He's really, really good. Like, once he secures the catch, he's tough to bring down, because he's very big, but he's also very, very fast. And the Bears saw that. And unfortunately, when you're missing, look, I know TJ Edwards is back, but like, he's just back from injury. Same thing with Noah Sewell. You're still kind of filtering in guys that would be like third stringers or practice squad players at your linebacker position. You find out before the game Kyler Gordon can't play. That's a big kick in the teeth as well, and he's likely out for the rest of the season now. Maybe he just shouldn't have come back and should have just rested up. And unfortunately, that's what happens. One of their touchdowns that they got was a mistake from Jalen Johnson, and maybe that's rust from him not playing for such a long portion of the year. Like, these things can happen, but ultimately you just came up against a very good football team, and when there's 2 good football teams, the fine margins are so small. And we mentioned a couple, like I said, that touchdown that they scored where Jalen Johnson just needs to know where he needs to be. And as coaches always say, deepest is the deepest. And he needed to get deeper there. And unfortunately, I think it was Jaquan Brisker that was kind of having to try and cover for him as well. And when you make mental errors, I think coaches will be more annoyed with that than a mistake that Caleb would have made in terms of a throw, or someone, or for example, not getting the first down on that run by a yard. Like, these are things that can be fixed. The mental mistakes is one that they won't like, but again, it comes from a guy like Jalen Johnson that you don't expect that to happen again. You expect him to be ready moving forward, and look, those things happen. But again, I think people should be a little bit more positive kind of moving forward, because I think that was a game where you're coming up against a legit team that will be in the mix for the NFC, and you looked good. And like I said, if that game's continuing for a few more minutes, you're probably in with a shot of winning, because the Packers defense could not stop the Bears defense towards the end. If they got that, like I said, if they got that first down and the Bears could just keep running, it didn't look like the Packers were going to be able to stop the run. And for me, offensively, that's the biggest positive, because this is what we spoke about at the start of the year. Like, it's the running game in a Ben Johnson offense. If he can get the running game effective and get the running game going, like, you know what he's teaching the guys on the offensive side of the football is working. And over the past few weeks, obviously the Eagles game was ridiculous, getting over like 200 and something yards on the ground, two guys getting over 100 yards. But for the Bears to struggle in the running game in the first half, but then to come out and pretty much pound the Packers' heads in on when they were on defense with the running game, it's a really good sign. You start seeing the offensive line get a little bit more confidence in themselves in the second half and starting kind of mauling guys, and you started to see the Ben Johnson offense. And all we need there is like consistency. Do it for the full game. You do it for the full game against Green Bay, and you probably win that game by about 10 points. And unfortunately, the first half, they just didn't show up for whatever reason. The defense kept them in it. They made enough plays to keep themselves in touching distance to give them a chance to win. But ultimately, when you don't play for a half against a team like Green Bay, you're going to lose. And those are things that they know they have to clean up. You'll probably see a much better performance in, 10 days' time now. So, yeah, I'm pretty positive overall about this team's chances moving forward. Even though there's some tough games in the schedule, the Bears are a tough game for other teams. And that's what people need to realize. This isn't the same losing Bears that you go into a tough game against, like, for example, a 49ers and be like, oh, well, we're not going to win that because the 49ers are a good team. Now be confident. This team is a good team. All they need to do is put things together, be consistent with what the messaging is from the coaching staff, and kind of put the plan in place, and don't start that in the second half. Don't make it so that Ben Johnson has to make all these adjustments in the second half. Get on top of a team like they did against Philadelphia, and I think that's where people will start believing in you. Like, if the Bears do beat the Packers at Soldier and then can do the same against the 49ers, I think people will have the confidence will come back that we saw after the Eagles game.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. And it's a really interesting position for the Bears to be in, because, again, expectations have accelerated so quickly. I saw somebody in the chat saying they went to their local Bears bar in New York City and there were more people there than they've ever seen there for a Bears game. And all of these kind of hibernating Bears fans from across the landscape who, look, I'm not going to heap any shame on them. It has been very tough to be a Bears fan for a long time. And if they wanted to protect their spirit and their mental health, they didn't want to do that. They didn't want to stand up and say, I'm a Bears fan. I get it. There's certainly Sundays in the past where I didn't wear my sweatshirt out afterwards because I was like, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to answer all the questions. And now that the team is good and they're coming up with results and that they are fun to watch, so many Bears fans are coming out of the woods, and it is so cool to see. It's one of the sort of really cool byproducts of a good season. But expectations have changed so quickly that everybody's like, "Oh, I wish they didn't start slow." Man, you want to talk about starting slow? They started slow last year. They averaged 1.6 points per game in the first quarter. That was by far the worst in the NFL. This year, they're averaging almost a touchdown per in the first quarter. That is a massive change, and that is Ben Johnson all the way. So they don't start as slow as they used to. They did start slow in this one. The offense did not look good, but again, that's probably more uncommon. It feels very familiar to Bears fans because it's happened lots and lots of times in the past before Ben, but under Ben, this team's averaging almost a full touchdown per first quarter in every game. So overall, I think that's a pretty good transition spot. We do not have Northwatch this week because we were sick last week, didn't get back on the horse this week. You know how it is when you're coming back from injury. Not everything comes back all at once. So we will have the guys on next week and have their reports for Northwatch, but we do have Mike on the mic for this week. And this is probably a pretty good time to play it before we talk about what's left for the Bears for the rest of the season.
Thank you so much, EJ and Kieran, and welcome back, friends, to another edition of Mike on the Mic here on the Bear Era Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Mercado. Thank you so much for making us a part of your day. And the Bears are looking to bounce back after a heartbreaking defeat to the Green Bay Packers in Green Bay by beating the Cleveland Browns in Chicago in Week 15. Now, the talk around Bears Nation is how exactly are the Chicago Bears going to beat the Cleveland Browns and get their 10th victory in the season? This is a Browns team that beat the Green Bay Packers earlier on this season. Surprisingly enough, a Browns defense that is top of the league in many different categories, but it's the same team that just gave up 31 points to the lonely Tennessee Titans. So what exactly do the Chicago Bears need to do to keep pace with the Green Bay Packers, with the Detroit Lions, to keep their playoff aspirations alive? Well, I did some research for each and every one of you. I went to the school board, I brought out the legal pad, and I found the path to victory. A way for the 10th victory of the season to come to the Chicago Bears and to get one step closer to the NFC playoffs. Now, in the last 5 games, here's what we've seen from the Cleveland Browns. They lost to the New York Jets 27-20 on the road. Breece Hall, 21 carries, 83 yards, 1 reception, 42 yards, and a touchdown. The following week, they lost to the Ravens 23-16 at home. Derrick Henry, 18 carries, 103 yards, and a touchdown. The following week, they beat the Raiders 24-10 on the road. The following week, a loss against the 49ers, 26-8. Christian McCaffrey, 20 carries, 53 yards, and a touchdown. And just last week, they lose to the Tennessee Titans at home, 31-29. Tony Pollard, 25 carries, 161 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Now, wow, the Cleveland Browns do have the number 1 passing defense, and they do have a rushing defense that ranks right around the middle of the league. The Chicago Bears have the number 2 rushing offense in the entire NFL, averaging almost 153 yards per game and having 15 rushing touchdowns in the entire season. It's going to be a cold, bitter day in the lakefront of Chicago. Expect record temperatures in the lows this coming up Sunday. Now, we're saying all that, knowing that the Cleveland Browns have a top-tier passing defense, but middle of the league on rushing defense. You need Kyle Monangai. You need DeAndre Swift, and you need that offensive line to put their will, their domination on the defensive line of the Cleveland Browns. To neutralize Myles Garrett as best you can, to control the clock, and to walk away Week 15 with your 10th victory of the season. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You're going to rush the ball a bunch. You're going to punch the mouth of the Cleveland Browns defense, and you're going to demand that the rookie quarterback in Shedeur Sanders, the rookie running back in Judkins, respond and beat you at home. You're going to take the will away from this team. I'm expecting the Chicago Bears to run the ball a whole lot, to score a whole lot of touchdowns in the red zone, and to have a pleasant Sunday afternoon getting their 10th victory of the season. Thank you so much for joining us on this edition of Mike on the Mic here on the Bear Era Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Mercado. Enjoy Bears versus Browns and the entire Week 15 NFL slate. Now back to EJ and Kieran.
listening to Mike push through, man. We use Stuffy, and I swear he said lonely Tennessee Titans. And I was like, well, that's appropriate too. I know some Titans fans, they are pretty lonely. It is going to be fascinating to see how the elements play into this. The elements have really come into focus in this NFL season over the last 2 weeks. We've had multiple games each week where the weather, the temperature has played a factor, significant factor. A lot of times it's wind. We've had a couple of sloppy games already in terms of the ball being hard to hold on to. You've seen some easy drops, people losing their footing. It's just a factor late in the year. And we forget about it with a lot of dome teams. Doesn't really affect them. But for the teams that play outside and get to play home games, this is going to be a thing. -20 in Chicago is no joke. It is not going to be business as usual for a lot of those players. And Mike's right about one thing. You do have to bring your will to a game like this because enjoyable. It's good if you win, but this game's not going to be enjoyable for anybody. It hurts so much to have the kind of impact these guys have on a week-to-week basis. You add in that kind of cold, and it is genuinely bone jarring. Nobody's going to feel great. Of course, nobody's going to feel anything because they're all going to be completely numb, but Monday is not going to be friendly when they thaw out. So it's going to be a difficult game. It is not probably going to be a big passing game. It is difficult to pass the ball in those conditions. So it is going to be a grinded out kind of contest. And that does come down to who wants it more. I know that is a sort of classic football truism that people are like, yeah, but we have advanced stats now. Advanced stats don't really count for 20 degrees below zero. At that point, stats kind of go out the window, and who wants to be out there more matters, I would say, a little bit more than a lot of that does on a typical NFL week. So we'll see, but that's really just the kickoff. Game versus the Browns is, in my mind, a game versus half a team. The defense is elite. The offense looked better in the second half last week under Shedeur. He did have a couple of good drives strung together, the kind of play we haven't seen him hit in the NFL yet. So if that continues, could be a problem. But again, it's so funny because it's all the things that were leveled at Caleb last year. Doesn't play on schedule, gets out, barely puts things together on the back end. He's not playing in time in the offense. He's having to basically manufacture things. All those things are true right now. It's a guy literally in his second start in the NFL. That's going to be true for most starters, but he is still kind of making it up as he goes along. And that's going to be tougher in those kind of conditions for sure. We're not going to see as many of those plays completed as we would in fair weather. So not super worried about Browns offense. Browns defense, always worried about them. Come on, best player in the league, Myles Garrett. He plays on that defense along with a bunch of other contributors on that defensive line. The secondary is not bad either. So it is tough. They also have a rookie of the year candidate in Schweschinger as a linebacker. So this is a for real defense and a we'll see kind of offense. The rest of the teams, obviously the rematch with the Packers coming back to Soldier Field is going to be interesting. It's difficult to beat a team twice in 3 weeks anytime in the NFL season. I don't care early in the season, late in the season, indoors, outdoors, doesn't matter. When you see a team that you just saw, all the scouting reports are pretty valid. Plus you just played against them. You have all that game film. Nobody really gets to sort of bring special surprises to the second game of a rivalry game. So should be a very hard fought game. And that one to me feels a lot more even in the schedule. Game at the 49ers, weather should be decent, but the 49ers are a tough team and also in a very good division. In fact, the best division win percentage wise in football, the NFC West. NFC North is second behind the NFC West. 3 teams with at least 9 wins. 49ers, one of them, of course, and they too have been ravaged by injuries on defense, just like the Bears. But Shanahan has kept that team fighting. Robert Saleh has all the replacements on defense playing far better than I thought they could. So that's going to be a very tough game. And then finishing up versus the Lions. We'll see how the weather holds for that one, but the Lions have been a very good team all year. And obviously Ben's very familiar with them, working for them for the last 3 years. That's going to be a fascinating game. So if you look at the slates down the stretch, like the Packers slate, the Bears slate, and the Lions slate, the Bears have one of, if not the toughest out of the 3. It's at least sort of tied for first in terms of each of those games has a challenge. The Browns probably has the least challenge, but then there's the weather on top of that. So unpredictability is going to be really high. I don't think they're going to lose all 4. In fact, I don't even think they're probably going to lose half of them. I think they're going to split. I think they're going to come up some combination of those 4 games of 2-2. Don't necessarily know where the wins are going to come from, and you can never tell about week 18 because some teams play their starters, some teams don't need to. It's just a strange time, so even tougher to predict that. But I imagine they're probably going to rack up a couple of more wins, and if they do, that's what Ben's really putting his eyes towards. If the wins are both against the Packers and the Lions, boy, wouldn't that be great? Because the divisional wins will sort of count twice. But overall, it is an interesting stretch. What do you see over the last month for the Bears, and what are the things that are really pricking your ears up as we get into this final roll towards whatever the 2025 Bears are going to be?
I feel quite confident with the upcoming game against the Browns. With the elements that are going to be played, Mike mentioned it, I think the Bears will be able to score on the Browns through the running game, because the running game has really been kind of as the running game goes, kind of where the confidence of the offense goes. And I do think that's where the Browns over the last number of weeks, even when it's those weeks that they've looked good, have been very shaky. And I think that the Bears will have success there. You mentioned it in terms of the offense for the Browns, which Shedeur looked better last week, but my biggest question would be, how patient can he be? Like, he's not played in this type of weather before. If they try and run the ball more, is he gonna kind of revolt a little bit? Because we've seen that from him at times, where he wants it to be the Shedeur game, and ultimately when you come in these conditions, that's tough, and that could lead to mistakes and could lead to the Bears getting interceptions. And I could definitely foresee that. Like, I could foresee this being another one of those games where the Bears get 3 turnovers and can run the ball, and that's what leads you to a victory against the Cleveland Browns. The Packers, I think you summed it up very well. It's very difficult to beat a team twice in 3 weeks, especially a team that towards the end of the game were looking very good. The Bears will know how they need to attack the Packers defense. Potentially the Bears defense might be a little bit healthier. There's a very real possibility that Tremaine Edmonds will be back for the Packers game. I don't think he's going to be back for this Cleveland game. Now, I haven't seen any of the injury reports this week, but really Wednesday you can't really tell much from it anyway. But I do think that the Bears will be a little bit healthier for that second game against the Packers. And I felt quite confident that if the Bears did score, they would have went for 2, and they probably would have a pretty good chance to do it. And look, it's a shame, but again, it gives me confidence for the game again when it gets to Soldier, because I don't think the team will be quite as nervous as they were at the start of the game at Lambeau, because I think was a bit of a component. I think we can say there wasn't an element of nerves, but I think on offense something wasn't clicking early on, but they found that confidence in the second half, and that's where you really saw the offense that we saw against the Eagles. And if you see that for consistently over the last 4 games, you said it right, like, there's not a game coming up here where I'm just like, can't win that. Like, really isn't. Like, the 49ers, you mentioned it, their defense has been depleted. They're playing well, but ultimately when you come up against a depleted defense, if you are a good offense, you'll be able to score. And then the question is, what can their offense do? Brock Purdy at times has looked good, but then at other times looks like he's still carrying an injury. And it just depends on where you are defensively at that point in time. The Lions game for me is probably the one where I'm where I'd be most concerned, because like, they've put up points against teams, and depending on what week you get the Lions can depend on who you get. But of the final 4 games, that's the worst matchup for the Bears in my opinion. I think what they do on offense really does not suit the Bears defense, and look, the Bears offense is much better than what the Lions would have seen in week 2. And do I think it's one where the Bears just can't win? No, but I do think it is one where they could probably be scored on by quite a substantial margin, because if they have Amon-Ra back for that game, which I'd assume they would, and Jahmyr Gibbs is there and he's playing really good football, it's tough. Like, maybe you get lucky and maybe it's like, maybe they've racked off a couple of wins here. The Bears rack off a couple of wins, same with the Packers. And all three teams at that point in time have their 11 wins or roughly around that point. And maybe the 49ers have lost some games. The Carolina Panthers have lost some games. And ultimately, that final game isn't going to mean too much if somebody else falls away. Like, that's what, against the Lions, that's still a potential scenario that can happen. Because the Lions are, at 8 wins now? Like, again, it's like the 49ers are at 9. If the 49ers lose a couple of games here, the Lions win a couple, the Bears win a couple, like, that's one where that final week, it's so up in the air. You just don't know where these teams are going to be. If the Lions are already in the playoffs at that point, like, with the amount of injuries they had, they'd be crazy to play all their players, because that's a team that I would say they need to rest guys if they get into the playoffs, because they just need guys to be healthy. So that's where that one is an interesting one. But I do feel pretty confident from what I've seen from this team. They've bounced back every time this year when they've lost a football game. The game against the Ravens was disappointing, but then they just racked off win after win after win. Would I be surprised if the Bears head into that final game against the Lions after winning the previous 3? No. Would I be surprised if they lost a few? Also, no, because they're good teams they're playing against.
Sure.
But I just go back to the point of, I see this team much different than in the past. They're a good football team. And if they can impose their will on the opposing defense, this offense is good enough to put up enough points to win. And they fell a little bit short against Green Bay, but it was very, very, like, the scoreline obviously doesn't really represent the game. It was probably more of like a 1 or 2 point game rather than a 7-point game. But that's where I think I have confidence going in here over the next couple of weeks, because I think this team's good enough to win these football games, and all they need to do is they need to put a full game together. They need to be consistent with what they're doing, and they need to do what they did against the Eagles. You need to dominate at the line of scrimmage. If you can do that to a certain point, it's tough against a guy like Myles Garrett, but against the rest of them against Cleveland, like, that's what you need to do. What you did in the second half against an elite Packers defense, and you were dominating them for the most part. They made some plays here or there, but you could tell the Packers defense was getting pissed off with each other because they knew the Bears would run the ball and they couldn't stop them. And that was very similar to what the Eagles did. The problem was the Bears only did that for one half. If they did that for the full game, there's no question in my mind we would be talking here today with a 10-3 football team. But that's not what happens in the NFL. You can win and lose any single week. But I think the Bears they've given the fans enough, or given themselves enough credit with the fans to have a little bit of faith, because they've won. Like, let's just remember here where we were a year ago. Like, they've got a winning season already. At the start of the year, we would have been like, if we can get a winning season this year, that would be a successful year.
Mm-hmm.
They've got to that point now, and there's still 4 games to go. I have faith that they'll win at least 2, like you said. I think they'll probably do that, and they'll probably end up with 11 wins. Will it get you in? Maybe. It just depends on the teams around you. But even if it doesn't, don't be disappointed. Because what they've done this year, you've got to give a lot of credit to the players, because they've gone through a lot of adversity with injuries and stuff, but also to the coaches, because this is a team that has improved throughout the year. And we don't always see that. And especially as Bears fans, we don't always see that. But I do want to kind of make sure that we all remember what this team is. Like, this is a very good football team that is improving, that is ascending, that has a lot of young players in this team that are making plays. And just get behind them. like have that confidence going into these games because we have a good football team, and when you have a good football team, you could win any single week.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I would say the two most valuable wins out of the final four games would be versus San Francisco and Detroit. Packers are probably going to win the division anyways. So taking a game from them is fine, but it doesn't really change things. In terms of who you're jockeying against, both within the division, it's the Lions, and within the overall playoff seeding, it's the Niners. And if you can beat both the Niners and the Lions head to head, you pick up two wins, and it's two valuable wins because if it comes down to a tiebreaker with either of those teams, you have wins over them. So that is good. Obviously, the Detroit tiebreaker would come down to, I think, either strength of schedule or total points. I forget which one comes first. But those are the ones that really matter because, again, the Niners have games against now this is assuming the Bears could beat the Niners against the Bears and the Hawks. And depending on the Hawks, it doesn't look like they're probably going to rest their starters in the final week because they're not in the top spot. So Mike Mack's going to keep those guys playing. And I like the Hawks in that game actually quite a bunch. So that would be their sort of two losses. Again, if the Bears took a loss to the Packers, and who knows, maybe lost to the Browns, which is possible in conditions like that, but beat the 49ers and the Lions, those would be the two most valuable wins if you're talking about two wins because you're taking the legs out of two other contenders that you are in the same position relative in the standings to. So they're going to be the ones competing with you for those final NFC spots, assuming that the Packers are going to win the division, that the wheels don't fall completely off. And there's no reason to think that they're going to. So it'll be fascinating because, like folks in the chat are saying, hey, there's tons in play here, many moving pieces. It's going to be an interesting month, and the NFL set it up that way. A lot of division games, solid division games towards the end of the year that really can change the swing, and they did it on purpose. Makes a better product. If this was all settled, we were going into the last 3 or 4 weeks going, yeah, there's only maybe a couple of races up for grabs. It's not near as interesting. So it's going to hold your attention, and there's lots to watch. And as we know, the NFL is very, very difficult to predict, and there are going to be some surprises here. Some teams that everybody right now with 4 games to go is saying, oh yeah, they're going to win out, or oh yeah, they'll win at least half their games, and they aren't. They're not going to win any. They're going to go on a slide for one reason or another. Heck, a week ago, the Colts were still a powerhouse, declining powerhouse, but they were still a powerhouse. And now they might be quarterbacked by Grandpa Phillip Rivers. So you just never know what's going to happen in the NFL. I'm going to scroll through the chat real quickly, and we're going to answer a few questions, but we're also going to keep it kind of short this week because nobody's quite back to full strength, and we don't want to overdo it and go back on IR. Cough, cough, Kyler Gordon.
Yes.
Yes.
I will say it's way more fun getting to watch the team, talk about the team for meaningful games here heading into Christmas versus looking at Tankathon and seeing where the Bears going to end up with their draft pick. So
yep,
like that's the good part. Like last year we were at this point, it's like which teams around them could lose so that they get a top draft pick and stuff like that. It's so much better being in this position.
Yeah, I was looking at a chat that I'm in last week, and somebody put like, I think it was $100 on Carson Schwarzenegger as Rookie of the Year preseason.
Oh man,
because it was 5,000 to 1.
You should always do that when it's a draft class that hasn't had an elite quarterback, because even if there's
defensive
good quarterback, they always get it. But like this year, like all bets are off.
Exactly, and that bet might be on, and if it is, I think dinner's probably on that guy. But it's pretty interesting. I'm looking at the poll. Mike's doing a great job as always for us. Our super producer Mike Mercado.
Before we go through some comments though, EJ, I know I think we may have missed it earlier. There was 2 super chats as well.
Oh, I did miss them.
And so Blonde 95 gave $5. Said so Debo went last year for a 5th, and Washington took the cap hit. What's the value for DJ Moore? The same or maybe a 4? So thank you for the super chat.
Absolutely. Thank you for the super chat. The value is not great. And DJ, we didn't touch on it. We haven't touched on it for a couple of weeks. We did touch on it about 3 weeks ago. It's a mystery, and it's only gotten more mystifying. Again, Rome's out. DJ Moore is healthy on the roster, and he has like 4 total targets in that game. And that is mystifying. There is obviously a rift there. I don't know why. I don't know if it's personality. I don't know if it's performance, but it is very clear. Again, don't listen to what I say, watch what I do. The Bears are not centering very much, if at all, any of the offense around DJ Moore. It's just not happening on the field. That doesn't, I don't think he's playing injured. Sometimes that factors into it. I think there's just a sort of difference of opinion in there about usage and value between the current staff and DJ Moore. He didn't obviously come to the team under the current higher ups, and there is going to be a decision made. I think most of us know what that's going to be in the offseason. They're going to find a way to get something for him and move him along, because he's just taking up space right now. He's just using up oxygen in that room. And it's not, if there was any week we would have seen him featured, it was this last week, and it just, it didn't happen. So the value, there are teams with needs for sure, and maybe a change of scenery would do him good. But I mean, look at what like Brandon Cooks, who was, averaging 1,000 yards every year of his career when he got traded 5 different times. Look what he garnered in the later years of his career. It was 4ths and 5ths and swaps of 6ths, and that's going to be pretty comparable or typical value for a guy that is at a low ebb right now. And maybe somebody buys low and is able to get previous performance levels out of him. But man, wide receivers are kind of like racehorses. They don't typically have big swings, declines in performance, and then come raging back for long periods of time. They might have half a season where they look good again. But it's just, NFL success is very, very fickle. And it is, in that position, athletically oriented, and the odds get progressively stacked against you as you get older. Guys like Keenan Allen that are still being productive at any stretch at that point of his career are a rarity, not a certainty.
Yeah, and in Ben Johnson's offense, we said this at the start of the year, they want guys for specific roles. They don't need your prototypical like wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2. Like that doesn't exist in a Ben Johnson offense, and that's what we were saying. Like Amon-Ra St. Brown was the number 1 guy there because what does he do well in terms of his route running, getting open and things like that. But like the rest of them, they had obviously Jameson Williams, who just like is that speedster that can break the top off a defense. But then you had a bunch of different guys that fit into roles, and like that doesn't work when you have DJ who's making $23 million a year. And I won't be surprised if a team like Buffalo Bills or something get a little bit desperate because of all the woes they've had at wide receiver in recent years. Like there'll be somebody that will come in, and it might be where the compensation might not look good, but they'll take on a good chunk of the money, and the Bears will be happy enough with that because they'll do that. They'll get an extra pick. They'll probably select a wide receiver at some point in the middle rounds and be like, well, this guy will fit this role that we want to do. And look, you saw against Green Bay is they're happy enough to give Luther Burden a more expanded role and get him more incorporated into the offense. And when Rome eventually comes back, get Rome into it. Look, I think a lot of DJ's touches have actually been taken up by Colston Loveland. And to be fair to Colston, like when the ball goes his way, he pretty much catches it every single time and can absorb the hits. And again, he's 21 years old and he is an ascending player. You don't have to be your $20+ million receiver in the prototype that DJ Moore is, because you don't see a lot of that in the Ben Johnson offense. He would much prefer, and I actually agree with this, I'd much prefer investment in the offensive line and building out that and building out protection for your quarterback. Your quarterback gets protection. You can find guys that can get open in Ben Johnson's offense. For Ben Johnson's offense, you just need to keep improving on the running game and then just have guys that are shifty enough to get open. And look at what Seattle does. I know it's a different situation just because of how good JSN is. But that's the style of receiver that Ben Johnson wants. A guy that can get open in like 2 seconds flat because his route running's elite and has good speed to get away from players. Like, that's what he wants to see. He doesn't want the go up and get it guy and just contested catches. Like, Ben Johnson prefers when his guys get open rather than throwing up a 50-50 ball. Like, Ben Johnson doesn't like 50-50 balls. And he has said that multiple times. And that's why even when you look in the draft now, like, don't look at guys that are going to be like DJ Moore. They're just these big guys that can go up and get it, or your DK Metcalfs and stuff, because that's not going to fit what Ben wants to do. He wants guys that can literally just get open in a flash and can get a lot of run after catch, because the tough yards is going to be done with his tight ends, is going to be done with his running game. And ultimately, DJ doesn't really fit that. And if you're not productive and you're making over $20 million, you're going to end up getting traded.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, that much salary. The other thing about Colson Loveland is he's a tight end, not a wide receiver. And that designation means a lot in the NFL in terms of salary. Even if he was one of the top paid tight ends, he still wouldn't be making that.
Plays like a wide receiver, but is a tight end.
He's marked as a tight end, and that does mean things to the NFLPA and to agents and to teams. They can pay them less. And if you're getting similar production, which a lot of teams are out of the tight end position, we've seen it for years and years now, that's a value. It's a market inequity. You can call it whatever you like. Bears are taking advantage of it for sure. The other one doesn't show a name, but I think it's Paul Spencer. Says, I'm out and about again. But I'm glad to see everyone's feeling better and back at it. I love the fact that we actually just know who these people are. It's fantastic. Can't wait to catch the recording. We can't wait for that either, Paul. Thank you again for taking the time while you're out to drop a super chat in, even though you can't watch us live. I really appreciate everybody that comes back, and we've had some growth. I happened to mention the podcast on Bootleg because we were talking about the Bears, and I got a DM from Mike that was like, hey, when did we pass 1,500 subs? I was like, well, I did mention it in an episode that got, X thousand views. Yeah, stands to reason. So appreciate everybody that's new here, checking us out for the first time. We will be here every week of the Bears season, however long that lasts. And we are going to have some off-season content as well. It will not be weekly, but we will catch you up through the draft process, who the Bears are looking at. I will be on the draft circuit again this year. Certainly talking to some of the Bears scouts, as I always do, and seeing what I can glean about what they're going to do. But right now, especially given the way that this season's gone, I would be shocked, and I mean pale-faced shocked, if they didn't spend most of their resources on defense, free agency, and the draft. They need it. Yeah. They need it badly. The offense, look, they are set up. They've got young players. They've got Rome. They've got Colson. They've got Luther Burden. If Trapillo works out at left tackle, and Ben is happy to have him keep mauling in the run game and doing, I would say, fairly well in the pass game, and obviously all the investment they made on the rest of the offensive line, if that holds up as their starting five, yeah, sure, go get yourself a backup center. Go get yourself another couple of backup guards. Luke Newman's played well in spots. You're fine. Caleb is your guy. You need a running back. Fine. Spend a pick on a running back down the board. You can do that and get good production, but go get defense. You need everything. You need inside linebackers. You need guys in the safety pipeline who are younger and healthier. You don't really need corners. You got a lot of corners. You just got to get them back healthy, but you need defensive line like I need air. You need somebody opposite Montez Sweat. And there are lots of pass rushers in this draft. It is loaded. You need defensive tackles who are not Grady Jarrett at the end of his NFL career, who are in there and making a mess of things. Again, you're going to have to spend some draft capital to go get them. It's not a great free agency year for defense, but it's not the end of the world. You're going to be able to pick up some usable pieces, probably at inside linebacker as well. Get that side of the ball competitive, and Ben will take care of the offense. He already has. And again, you pair that offense in year two with a just competent mid-pack defense. We've seen that equation work extremely well for teams like the Chiefs. Chiefs defense has been mid-pack for years. A couple of elite players, but overall mid-pack in the stats, they don't care because their offense was getting it done. It's taken them to conference championships, Super Bowl games, and it can do the same thing for the Bears. So overall, I got to say, draft class is looking pretty good from last year, especially if Ozzie works out as a starter. That is a huge swing, but Loveland looks very good. Burden is starting to pick it up. Trapillo, again, we just talked about him. Then there's that weird sort of, we'll just call it the Ryan Poles lull in the middle where he went Shamar Turner, Ruben Hippolyte. Zay, I actually like as a player. That's just kind of a hidden gem from this year's draft that's going to come back next year. Hasn't played all year, but not a bad player. Luke Newman's played well in spots, and of course, Monagai in the 7th. So really it was just, 3 strong choices, then a couple of, what are you doing, Ryan? And then, 3 very strong choices, I think, on the back end with Zay Frazier, Newman, and Monagai. So very good draft class. Going to need to stack a couple more of those and not waste those picks in the middle rounds. But overall, got to get some defense, and this team will be competitive. It's already competitive. It'll be very, very competitive, and you don't have to squint very much to see it. So we're going to use that to wrap it up. Say thank you to all of you. Looking forward to the holidays. Hope you are as well. If, I don't know, every online retailer in the known world hasn't told you that there's a limited number of days until Christmas, there are. So get on it. And no matter how you celebrate the holidays, whether it's Christmas or not, I hope you and yours enjoy it. We will see you a couple of more times before then. But next week, we'll have the NFC North Watch guys back. We will, of course, have Mike on the mic, and hopefully we will keep everybody healthy so we can keep you up to date on what happened against Cleveland and what might be the new modern Ice Bowl. Who knows? You just never know with weather along the lake. But until then, thanks for watching, and we will see you next week.